All right, this is part two of the Reformation. This is the notes for the section entitled The Reformation Continues. I wanted to make an additional comment about the previous notes and go back to it real quick here. These are the children of Henry VIII, and they carried on the religious confusion that he started in his country. His son continued Protestantism. His daughter violently took them back to Catholicism, and his second daughter maintained and established Protestantism in England, but it was tumultuous, to say the least. All right, the Reformation also continued and spread to different areas, kind of like the Renaissance did. So let's look at a couple of those. This guy right here, Ulrich Zwingli, brought the Reformation to Switzerland, where it found a home and a lot of support. All right, other Protestants, probably the second most famous Protestant was this guy, John Calvin, and he wrote this book called The Institutes of the Christian Religion, giving like theology in line with his way of thinking that was Protestant. And if we go to our definitions here, the first vocab word, Calvinism, just like Lutheranism, Calvinism is the title for those who follow the teachings of John Calvin, or the belief system that is structured around the teachings of John Calvin. All right, going on. This guy, it's not the same guy, even though it kind of looks like it. Slightly different guy. All right, this is a different guy bringing another part of Protestantism to another part of Europe. This is John Knox, and he brought Protestantism to Scotland. He was actually alive during the time of Henry VIII's Catholic daughter, whose name was Mary, who was hunting down and murdering Protestants in England, and he had the opportunity to come before her and talk to her about Protestantism. So it's kind of a neat witnessing opportunity there that he had that other Protestants didn't have the fortune to be able to do. Also in Scotland, not Scotland, in France. France was a very, very Catholic country. They didn't appreciate the Huguenots or the Catholics. The Catholics didn't appreciate the Protestants that converted there. They were called Huguenots. So as that frustration built and built, as France didn't embrace Protestant ideas, there was an incident called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, as you can probably figure out from the name, that these Protestants, who were a small minority in France, a lot of them got dragged out of their houses and murdered in the streets. And so there's this religious tension that's going to exist and continue to exist in France. So I have a picture. There it is. Kind of gross. Tough to be a Protestant in certain parts of Europe. All right, this woman is of note. This is Luther's wife. He was a monk, and they weren't allowed to marry, but then once he's Protestant, he's no longer Catholic, took on a wife, and behind every significant influential man is usually a pretty intelligent, well-grounded woman like Luther's wife, Catherine von Bora. He actually rescued her from her convent. She was a nun, and then they ended up getting married. All right, a couple of definitions here. The Jesuits, as all this was going on and people were leaving the Catholic Church, there was an order of individuals called the Jesuits under the leadership of this guy here, Ignatius Loyola, who made it a purpose to go out and evangelize and bring people back and bring new people into Catholicism. So the Jesuits are a missionary organization whose purpose was to bring new or bring back converts to Catholicism. All right, another thing that happened is the Catholic Church got together and had a meeting. It was called the Council of Trent, with all this stuff going on in Europe at the time. And this was a meeting of a bunch of leaders. They discussed, what do we do about the Reformation? They discussed, are they right about what they're saying about our church? And they did a little bit of reforming their doctrine. They did a little bit of keeping the same opinion about their doctrine. And they also made it a point to condemn the Reformation too, collectively, as a unit. So that's the Council of Trent. All right, this is a map of how Europe broke down religiously after the Reformation. You see there's a lot of division here. They're still mostly Catholic, So one thing that did not happen after the Reformation is there wasn't a mass exodus from the Catholic Church. There were still more Catholics than there were Protestants in Europe. But there's a bit of division you can see here. So a couple of long-lasting changes that the Reformation left in Europe after the event, after it first started, was number one, the Catholic Church was more united. They got together and they decided, no, we're right, the Reformation's wrong, and they decided it as a group. So that was an inadvertent result of the Reformation. All right, second was education was a result of the Reformation. There were a whole bunch of new Catholic universities, new Protestant universities, and they popped up all over Europe where people could go get an education, not just for religious reasons, but for all kinds of different things. And this is a picture of the town of Erfurt, where Luther went to school, and you'll see that in the video clip as well. But education was a result of the Reformation. All right, another result. There's some kings took this opportunity to exert their authority and become more powerful, like Henry VIII. The king in England going forward is going to have a lot more power. The king in France going forward is going to have a lot more power, king of Spain. And so there was some kings, some monarchs that took this opportunity to elevate themselves perhaps higher in power than the church. And the fourth answer, this idea of questioning things that people never thought you could question or never thought to question is going to lead to another period in European history, which we haven't got to, called the Enlightenment, where people are going to challenge scientific theories and theories of the universe and theories about human nature and come up with all kinds of neat discoveries and take themselves to learning opportunities that they didn't have before and technologies that they didn't have before. All right, there's one vocab word I didn't mention. It's I think it's implied from just what it's called, but the Catholic Reformation or the Counter-Reformation, it's sort of connected to the Jesuits. This was a movement by the Catholic Church to go out and bring people back in, and the instrument that they used were the Jesuits. But this is a movement to counter the effects of the Reformation and to be evangelical about Catholicism.